Sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. Everything that's wonderful is what I feel.
Hello, my name is David Bradburn, and I am a director, writer, and producer in the film and video industry. I want to thank Phil and Matt for asking me to be a part of this virtual summit. And I'm going to talk to you all about taking risk. Someone once said to me when I was in high school that the difference between a good time and a great time is that a great time there's the potential to get hurt. And I think that is true with taking risk. You are putting yourself in a potentially vulnerable situation. And that can be anywhere from, taking a risk like I'm going to ride my bike without a helmet to I'm going to leverage all of my resources into this one basket and hope that things work out. The thing that comes to mind, one of the things that comes to mind to me when talking about risk is fears. A lot of times people don't take risks because they're afraid. They think that the risk of failure is greater than the opportunity of reward, and that forces us often to live small. At times it's wise not to take the risk, but sometimes it requires us to live small and miss out on things. The other thing that comes to mind to me when taking risk is control. If how much of a situation we have to manage, to micromanage, to macromanage in order to feel safe and comfortable. And taking a risk often means giving up control, and often giving up levels of control that we want or feel that we need. And that's one of the things that makes risk scary. I want to talk to you about a couple of times I took a risk, just so you know that this is not something that's altogether foreign to me. Several years ago, I was working on a project, and I wanted to bring on another person, which I always do, but in this particular case, I wanted to bring on someone who was much, much further along with me on their journey in the industry than I was. And I don't think I fully understood that at the time, but I still was looking to fill a position that I normally fill myself. And so I approached this person, we had dinner, I pitched the idea of working together, and we had previously met and had some few interactions, and they agreed. And long story short, a year later or so, we'd finished our film project together. It's done relatively well. It was an amazing experience. However, it was also a very, very stressful experience on my end, because I realized soon after we had started to work together that I was a little bit out over the end of the tip of my skis, and that started to mess with my head, and I started to get really, really nervous and second guess myself and put an awful lot of pressure on myself. All of that was self-imposed. None of it was coming from the other person. And as we've gotten to know each other and become friends over the years, to be able to see how they move now and how they interact, I could have given myself a lot more grace. But I didn't know in that moment, and I was taking a huge risk. And I had well over $10,000 of my own money on the line on this particular project, and I was scared. And I continued to go forward. And I continued to work on it, and I pushed through the fears, and I found ways to relieve that pressure that I was putting on myself. And it turned into a really, really remarkable experience. I learned a lot. I gained a friend. I have a project that that we're proud of, and it was a great experience. Another risk that I took, I taught for many, many years. I taught for 20 years. About the 13th year, I realized I wanted to leave teaching and pursue a job in production full time. And it took about 7 or 8 years to find a job that would be a bit of a lateral move. I was giving up job security. I was giving up the salary of a 20-year teacher. I was giving up the security of a 20-year teacher, and I was going into an entirely new field where I wasn't starting out at the bottom. I had been doing freelance work. I'd been in the field, but I wasn't, totally 100% reliant upon the field. And I took that chance, and a lot of really good things came out of it. I had a lot of really good experiences, but about a year and a half in, it became really apparent that it was less and less a good fit, to the point that that was no longer an opportunity, and I had to pursue other things. But looking back, it still was, for me, the right decision. I knew that leaving teaching and going in this direction, working in production, was going to create opportunities that I wanted to have. And I knew leaving teaching, I knew when I resigned that stepping into this new position was a risk. that there was not the protection and the security that I had as a teacher. That played out as it played out. The final example is a current project I'm working on. I need to hire a producer. It's a short film that I wrote and directed, or wrote and will direct, but I needed a producer, and I reached out to a friend of mine who is an Emmy-nominated producer, and I said, hey, I'm looking for someone who's willing to come on and produce this. Do you know anybody? I was looking just for suggestions and recommendations. He's like, man, I'll do this. So had I not reached out to ask him if he knew who it was, I wouldn't know that he'd been willing to do it. And to be honest with you, I wanted to work with him, but I figured he was too busy. I knew a lot of his plate at the time was really full. He had a lot of stuff going on. So I just assumed that he wouldn't be available. But as it turns out, he's totally interested, and we're in the early planning stages of this project. All right, so those are just some of the examples of times I took risk, and in various ways they didn't necessarily work out how I wanted or planned, but they worked out in the end. So let's kind of get in the nuts and bolts of risk taking. Let's talk a little about what we aren't talking about. We're not talking about going into this blind. Okay, we're not talking about, hey, I know the stats are when you ride your bike without a helmet and you have a crash, you might really, really hurt yourself. I'm not talking about that kind of risk. Wear your helmets. I'm talking about risk where you count the cost. You know what those costs are going in, and you're okay with paying them if it doesn't happen. Let me say that again. You're okay paying the cost if it doesn't happen, if it doesn't work out. Go in with your eyes open. So you want to know the cost. Once you know the cost and you're settled with it, make the choice. This is about going after things that you want, things that you feel would be in your best interest, even though there might not be an easy way to get there. One of the things we do in our society is we push college. We say, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do. People go into an incredible amount of debt to do that, and often it works out and the earning potential is great. But going in that there's going to be this at least 2 to 4 year or 8 years, depending on what degree you're going after, amount of your life that you are giving over to go study a certain thing so that you can get a job in that is better than what you would have if you didn't do that. That you know the cost, you're willing to take them, you go for it. I'm talking about that type of approach to taking a risk. So once you know the cost, you make the choice, you move in that direction. You figure out the direction you want to be, you know where you are, you know where you want to be, and you go in that direction. And that has to be intentional. You have to make choices. If you're sitting around just saying like, okay, I'm going to pivot on whatever comes my way, you're not in control. You're not driving the bus. You're a passenger, and you're hoping that, as whatever bump is hit, that things end up in the right direction. Ever been to Disney World? They've got those cars, and there's the center track, and it's got little devices, so if you go too far to one side, it jolts the wheel back and forth. I've gone through that whole ride letting it drive itself, and it might be fun, but you don't really get where you're going smoothly or quickly. So once you're moving in that direction, reassess often, because once you take that first step, that's your new point A. Then you need to see where point B is and keep moving. It's no different than if you're, trying to hike through the woods with a compass. You go a little bit, then you find where you are again and figure out where you need to go and make those adjustments. So it's constantly tweaking where you're trying to go. I think one thing that's helpful for me to think about is, flipping from thinking about what is this going to cost me to what am I going to gain. So if you frame it in the positive of like, this is the direction I'm going, this is what I'm going to get, as opposed to this is what I'm going to lose. Again, be aware that you might lose, but keep focused on what you're going to gain and let that be the motivating factor, because we're either going to be motivated out of fear, what am I going to lose, or motivated out of hope, promise, and dreams, what am I going to gain? So that's my little quick and dirty about taking risk. Again, I'm David Bradburn. I'm a filmmaker, and either you happen to life or life happens to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for the Train to Positivity Virtual Summit. We hope you choose to have a great day. Please be sure to check out other positive influencers throughout the summit. And if you enjoyed this specific talk, feel free to like and subscribe and share with other positive humans through your favorite social media outlets using the hashtag #TrainOfPositivity.